I never thought that one day I would become an outsider in my own home. But when my mother looked at me with cold, indifferent eyes, and my brother sat casually on the sofa with his legs crossed, I realized I had been wrong. "Dad is gone, there's no reason for you to stay here anymore, Emily," Evan, my brother, said in a calm yet mocking tone. I froze. This house, the place I had spent so many years in, no longer had a place for me. Ever since my father fell ill, I had put my career on hold to stay home and take care of him. He had end-stage heart failure and his health was deteriorating, with pain tormenting him every day. Meanwhile, my mother left everything to me. She had no interest in caring for a sick person. She preferred going out with friends or watching TV. I was the only one by my father's side, tending to his meals, his medication, and helping him move when he no longer had the strength to do so himself. Evan knew none of this. He had left home at 24, right after graduating from a prestigious university with a degree in finance. When he landed a job at a major corporation, he acted as if he had stepped into an entirely different world, one that no longer included this old house or the people in it. He cut off all contact, never calling, never checking in. And yet, now he was here, just as my father had passed away. I hadn't even had time to grieve when Evan and my mother began discussing how to divide the inheritance. They spoke about the house as if it were just a commodity to be exchanged, completely forgetting that I was the one who had lived here all these years, taking care of my father until his last breath. "I can't live with you anymore, Emily. You never go out, you have no future. Evan and his wife have stable careers. I want to live with them and have a better life," my mother said, her voice indifferent, as if I were a stranger. I let out a bitter laugh. "And what about all the years I spent taking care of Dad? The money I sent you every month to cover expenses? My entire life has been dedicated to this family, and now you're telling me I don't belong here anymore?" Evan shrugged, not bothering to hide his smirk. "You've just been sitting around the house unemployed, haven't you? Don't act like you've done something extraordinary." I clenched my fists. Since my father passed, neither my mother nor Evan had once asked if I was okay. They had never acknowledged my sacrifices. All they cared about was the house, the money. And now I was being thrown out onto the street. Nothing more, nothing less. I looked at them both, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Fine. I'll go. But don't ever expect my help again." My mother remained silent, while Evan smirked with satisfaction. I turned away and walked to my room to pack my belongings. Maybe it was time for me to let everything go. But I knew this wasn't the end. I pulled my suitcase out of the house in silence. When the door closed behind me, I knew I would never return. No one saw me off, not a single regretful glance from my mother or Evan. But I didn't need that. What I needed now was a fresh start. I rented a small room in an old apartment building. It wasn't spacious, it wasn't luxurious, but at least it was mine. A place where I wasn't looked down upon, where I wasn't treated like a worthless burden. Looking back at my journey, I was never useless. Since college, I had known that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. I majored in economics, but I never had the ambition to work for a big corporation like Evan. I just wanted a stable life, to be able to take care of myself and my father. When my father fell ill, I realized I couldn't pursue a traditional office job. I needed a flexible source of income so I could be there for him. That's why I started looking into online business. At first, I sold small handmade items that I crafted myself, on e-commerce platforms. My first products didn't bring in much profit, but I didn't give up. I spent time studying the market, learning how to optimize my products, and promote them on social media. Gradually, I expanded my business, not just handmade items, but also working with suppliers to sell fashion and accessories. I wasn't doing it alone. I had a group of like-minded friends, people with knowledge in economics, management, design, and technology. Together we built an online sales platform, which allowed us to scale up our business. This job allowed me to earn enough to support myself without having to leave home. I could be there for my father, take care of him every day, while still running my business. My father was proud of me. He knew how hard I had worked to balance my family responsibilities and my personal career. "Emily, you're truly amazing," he once told me. "You've done things that not everyone has the courage to do." His words became my motivation to keep going. But my mother was different. She never saw my work as something serious. To her, if I wasn't working at a prestigious company in a sleek office, then it wasn't considered success. "How much longer are you going to do this, Emily?" my mother once asked with disappointment. "Staying cooped up at home like this? How do you expect to get anywhere in life?" Even though I sent her money every month to help with household expenses, she still saw me as a drifter. She constantly compared me to Evan, the one with a stable job at a major company, the one she believed would bring honor to the family. I didn't argue. I didn't need my mother to validate my worth. But now, after being cast aside by both her and Evan, I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows forever. I needed to rise. Not to prove to them that I was capable, but to prove to myself that I could do it. I sat down at my small desk, opened my laptop, and looked over the plans I had made. I would grow my business even bigger. I wouldn't falter. And I would make them regret ever underestimating me. As time passed, I grew accustomed to living on my own. I poured all my time into expanding my online business, seeking new partnerships, and building my own brand. Since leaving my mother's house, I hadn't contacted her or Evan. I had no reason to. They were the ones who severed our relationship. But then, one day, I received an unexpected call. My phone screen lit up with my mother's number. I hesitated for a moment before finally picking up. "Emily, how have you been?" Her voice was unnaturally gentle, as if nothing had ever happened between us. I didn't answer right away. I stayed silent, waiting to hear what she really wanted. "Evan is getting married," she continued, her tone filled with excitement. "I'm so happy he finally found someone worthy. She's the daughter of a well-off family. They're wealthy and well-respected in society." I smirked. My mother was always so proud of Evan, as if he were the greatest treasure in the world. "Well, good for him," I replied flatly. I thought that would be the end of the conversation, but my mother quickly moved on to the real reason for her call. "Evan wants a perfect wedding, and you know a proper wedding costs a lot of money." She paused for a moment before continuing. "I think we should help him. You and I can each contribute a little." I let out a dry laugh. I knew it. "How much do you want me to contribute?" I asked directly. She hesitated briefly, then said, $50,000. My eyes widened. $50,000? "Yes, and I'll come up with another $50,000. That way Evan can have a solid start." I didn't know whether to be angry or amused by how ridiculous this request was. "And where exactly are you getting $50,000 from?" I asked. She hesitated. "I'll borrow some, but you can cover your share, right? Your business is doing so well." A wave of anger surged through me. For years I had taken care of my father, managed all the household expenses, and my mother had never acknowledged it. Yet Evan, the one who abandoned his family for years, was the one she was willing to go all out for, even though he didn't deserve it. "No, I'm not helping," I said firmly. My mother froze. What? What did you just say? Evan hasn't cared about this family in years. He has a high-paying job, his own life, and now you want me to fund his wedding? Who do you think I am, a bank?" "Emily," my mother's voice sharpened. "Evan is your brother. You have to help him. Family is supposed to support each other." I let out a bitter laugh. "Then why wasn't Evan there when Dad needed help? Why didn't you make him take responsibility when Dad was sick? Or, does family supporting each other only apply to me?" She fell silent, unable to find an answer. I sighed, my voice softer but still firm. "Mom, I've been taken advantage of for long enough. I've helped you and Dad so much over the years, but you never once acknowledged it. So now, find someone else to help you." She snapped, her voice filled with anger. "Emily, you're so selfish. You have money, yet you're being stingy?" I closed my eyes, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Mom, I have money, but I'm not stupid." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I felt truly relieved, as if I had finally spoken the words I had been holding inside for so long. Maybe this was the moment I needed to completely cut ties with them. After that phone call, I never contacted my mother again. I had no interest in Evan or his wedding. I focused on my business, expanding it and seeking new opportunities. But no matter how hard I tried to stay away from my family, fate had a cruel way of pulling me back in. One morning I received a call from the hospital. "Is this Emily Dawson?" A serious voice came from the other end. "We're calling to inform you, your mother brought your father to the hospital in critical condition." I froze, my entire body stiffening. "How is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. There was a brief silence before the voice responded. "We're very sorry. He didn't make it." Time seemed to stop. I gripped my phone tightly, but everything else faded into the background. Somehow, I made it to the hospital. When I walked into the hospital room, my mother was sitting in a chair, scrolling through her phone as if it were just another ordinary day. She glanced up at me when I entered. "Oh, you're here too." I turned to look at the man lying motionless on the hospital bed. My father, the one who had loved me, who had always encouraged me through the hardest times. And now he was gone forever. The pain swelled in my chest, but I refused to let myself cry. I looked at my mother, trying to stay calm. "Were you here with Dad when he passed?" I asked. She absent-mindedly glanced at her phone screen and sighed. "No, I got here after the hospital called. By the time I arrived, it was too late." I felt my heart tighten. "Where were you when he needed you the most?" She shrugged. "I had plans to have lunch with friends. I didn't expect things to happen so quickly." I stood there, staring at the woman in front of me, a woman completely devoid of emotion, without grief, without remorse. My father had spent his whole life loving her, yet in his final moments, she wasn't even there. I turned away, disgusted. I was the one who had to arrange the funeral. My mother claimed she didn't have time to handle such matters, so everything fell on my shoulders. I didn't complain, because at the very least this was something I could do for my father one last time. The funeral was simple yet dignified. Friends and family came to pay their respects, offering sincere condolences. But then, in the middle of the ceremony, Evan arrived. He walked in with his fiancée, a woman dressed extravagantly, adorned with flashy jewelry, completely out of place for a funeral. Evan barely glanced at the casket before turning to my mother. "Mom, can we talk for a moment?" I watched them from a distance. And then, I heard the words that filled me with rage. "Mom, did Dad leave a will?" Evan asked in a hushed voice, but not quiet enough for me to miss it. My mother responded casually, "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you." I clenched my fists. My father had just passed, and all they cared about was his assets. Evan finally noticed me standing nearby and walked toward me. "Emily, do you know how much Dad left behind?" I looked straight at him. "Dad didn't have much money, Evan. He spent it all on medical bills and treatments over the years." Evan frowned. "That's impossible. He must have had some savings." I let out a bitter laugh. "He did. Until Mom spent it all." Evan's face darkened. He turned to my mother, but she simply shrugged indifferently. "Evan, you have to understand. I needed to live, too." I didn't care to listen anymore. I walked away, leaving them to argue over something they would never get. My father was gone, and I realized these people were no longer worth my concern. After my father's funeral, I knew that my relationship with my family had reached the point of no return. There was nothing left to say to my mother or Evan. They weren't grieving, they weren't mourning, they only cared about my father's assets. But they had no idea about the truth I had kept hidden all this time. They believed the house still belonged to my father and that after his passing it would automatically be theirs. But they were wrong. My father knew exactly what kind of people my mother and Evan were. He had seen Evan's indifference, had understood that my mother wasn't someone who could be trusted with money. So, before his health worsened, he transferred the house into my name. Legally, I had been the sole owner even before he passed away. I had never told them, until my mother and Evan came to find me. They sat across from me in the living room, their faces filled with anticipation. My mother took a sip of tea before speaking first. "Emily, what do you plan to do with the house?" she asked, her tone as if I were merely an outsider in this matter. Evan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I think the best option is to sell it and split the money." I looked at them calmly, feeling the anger simmering inside me, but keeping my expression composed. "There's nothing to split," I said firmly. "This house belongs to me." The room instantly froze. Evan let out a mocking laugh. "What did you just say? Dad's house is supposed to be divided according to inheritance laws?" I crossed my arms and looked directly at him. "Dad transferred the house to me before he passed away. It belongs to me. It has nothing to do with inheritance." Evan and my mother's expressions changed instantly. My mother slammed her teacup down on the table, her eyes widening. What? I slowly pulled out the legal documents and placed them on the table. It's all here. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to check. Evan grabbed the folder, skimmed through the pages, then threw it onto the table in frustration. No way! Dad never told me about this. Because he didn't trust you, I said bluntly. He knew that if he left anything to you or Mom, it would be gone in no time. My mother's face turned pale, speechless. Evan, on the other hand, glared at me, his eyes filled with rage. After a long silence, my mother spoke, trying to compose herself. Emily, you can't do this to your family. You can't be this selfish. I let out a bitter laugh. Family? Do you remember who took care of Dad in his final years? Who made sure he had meals, took his medication, and paid most of the household bills? I did. Meanwhile, where was Evan, living in the city, enjoying his life without a care? My mother clenched her fists, but she had no argument against what I had just said. Evan gritted his teeth. So what are you going to do with the house? I stood up and looked at them with unwavering determination. I'm selling it. Both my mother and Evan froze. I don't need this house anymore, I continued. It's just a shadow of the past, a place filled with painful memories and betrayal. I don't want to live here another second. My mother looked panicked. But if you sell the house, where will Evan and I go? I crossed my arms. That's your problem, not mine. Evan jumped to his feet, furious. Emily, you can't do this. This is our family home. I stared at him coldly. Family? If you actually cared about family, you wouldn't have abandoned Dad when he needed you the most. Evan said nothing, but his glare was filled with resentment. I looked at my mother one last time. I've had enough. From this day forward, I have nothing to do with either of you. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. I knew this decision would change everything, but I had no regrets. After selling the house, I had nothing tying me to the past anymore. I left the small town where I had grown up, a place filled with memories of injustice, pain, and betrayal. It was time to build a new life, one that I had full control over. I had always dreamed of a warm place where endless blue beaches stretched along the horizon, where there were no condescending stares or meaningless criticism, and now I had the means to turn that dream into reality. I moved to Costa Rica, a tropical country with beautiful beaches and a relaxed way of life. I rented a small apartment near the coast where every morning I could hear the waves crashing against the shore, feel the cool ocean breeze, and experience a freedom I had never had before. At first, I continued running my online business. With just a laptop and an internet connection, I could manage everything from anywhere. No longer was I confined by the suffocating walls of my old house or my mother's scrutinizing gaze. I was free. I started making time for myself, something I had never had the chance to do before. I learned to surf, took a local cooking class, and made friends with people from all over the world. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy. While I was enjoying my new life, my mother and Evan were struggling in a completely different world. After losing the house, they had to rent a small apartment in the outskirts of the city. With no assets left to rely on, they were forced to fend for themselves. Evan had once had a high-paying job, but after getting married, he had grown complacent and spent recklessly. He had little to no savings, and now, with rent and living expenses piling up, things were harder than ever. My mother, who had always spent money thoughtlessly, was now facing a harsh reality. No more lavish shopping sprees, no more fine dining at expensive restaurants. She had to take a part-time job at a grocery store just to make ends meet. But the worst part was the debt. When my father was alive, he had always ensured our family's financial stability. But my mother, with her extravagant spending habits, had borrowed money to maintain her luxurious lifestyle. Back when I lived at home, I hadn't realized just how bad things had gotten, but now that no one was there to support her financially, she and Evan were spiraling into financial ruin. I knew all of this thanks to a private investigator I had hired to keep tabs on them from afar. I didn't hire him out of concern. I simply wanted to know how they were managing after throwing me aside. And the results were exactly as I had expected. Evan and his wife, accustomed to a life of luxury, couldn't adapt to financial struggles. They started borrowing money from unreliable sources, making their situation even worse. My mother wasn't faring any better. She had spent her entire life relying on others to take care of everything, and now that no one was there to help, she was falling into despair. One day I received an email from her. Emily, I know you've been keeping an eye on us. I know you can help. Please, I need you. You're my family. I stared at the words on the screen. Family? I remembered the times I was belittled and cast aside. I remembered my mother's cold gaze as she told me to leave. I remembered Evan's greed, how he only cared about my father's assets. They only considered me family when they needed money. I took a deep breath and deleted the email without replying. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I had left my past behind, and I would never look back. Emily's story is not just about escaping a toxic family. It's a testament to the power of independence. She was abandoned, ridiculed, and underestimated. But instead of breaking down, she built her own life with resilience and intelligence. When those who had mistreated her fell into hardship, they came back begging for help. But Emily had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Not everyone who calls themselves family deserves your kindness. And she moved forward, leaving the past behind, and embraced the life she had created for herself. What do you think about Emily's decision? Was she too cold? Or was it the only way to protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about family, life, and valuable lessons.